Today, I will be finishing doing my head gasket. This is part 2 of my head gasket on my Mk2 Golf. I am just checking how the internals of the engine are after doing 140,000 miles, and I am very happy with how they look. The piston I am looking at here is the one where the head gasket has been leaking into, which is why it's this strange brown colour. Here I'm just checking the condition of the block to make sure that it's not damaged by the overheating and the head gasket failure. And I'm very happy to say that it was not damaged in the slightest. This is the old head gasket. As far as we can work out, the failure point is exactly where the glove is, on the left hand side of that piston. So here's the inside of my engine. The water on top of the pistons is absolutely fine, that's where I've just removed the head and it's leaked. This is what the bottom half of a 4-cylinder engine looks like in slow motion.
Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. So that's TDC, is it?
Yeah. As I said in the last video, I was going to remove the manifolds on a bench. This is much easier because I can turn the head round to get to all the bolts that I need to. Here I'm removing the inlet manifold with the carb still attached, as it doesn't need to come off. Removing the inlet manifold on a Golf is fairly straightforward. There are 6 Allen key bolts, 4 short ones and 2 longer ones. Removing the manifold can be a bit tight because the gap between the inlet manifold and the exhaust manifold is very small. I'm using a slimline socket and extension here to get to all the bolts. This can be quite fiddly as the bolts are quite close to the cylinder head and a long way from where the socket is. Just make sure the Allen key is firmly in before undoing, otherwise they will easily round off. I've cracked all the bolts off by using the ratchet. I'm now just using the socket on an extension to undo them by hand. Once all the 6 bolts are out that hold the manifold in, the manifold simply lifts away from the head. Be careful as there is a coolant way that will often still hold water once the head is removed. Now the inlet manifold is out of the way, getting to the exhaust manifold is much easier. My bolts were very tight, so I had to ask my dad to hold the cylinder head down so I could get them off. Here I've just found a crack in my manifold, which is one of the reasons I'd like to replace it. As you can see, these bolts were very tight and the head was moving about a lot, so having a second person here definitely helps. On a Golf, the exhaust manifold is held on by 8 13mm bolts. These can be easily got to once the head is off. For my end goal for the car, the current manifold is very restrictive, therefore I will be putting a 4:1 4-branch manifold on instead. The 4 bolts underneath are slightly more difficult to get to because of the downpipe being in the way. However, simply using a spanner can overcome this quite easily. So here I'm just removing the last couple of nuts and the manifold will be able to be lifted from the head. It doesn't matter if the studs come off as they will just wind straight back in again. The Golf has separate exhaust gaskets, so make sure they come with it. Here you can see the crack in my manifold. Ta-da! Got crack. The old manifold. Right. And that is how you remove the cylinder head on a Mk2 Golf.